Jean-François Lisée is here. Jean-François, we're going to have to talk about what Yves-François Blanchet had to say. I could tell you by virtue of the fact that when we asked this as a question of our callers, of our listeners rather, not a lot of people happy with what he had to say. This whole idea of Montreal being unrecognizable, there are two different Quebecs. First of all, did you read the interview?
Here we go
Yes, I did.
again.
And what did you think?
Well, I fail to see what's new in that. I mean, we've always talked about the two solitudes. And there's a part of Montreal that is non-francophone, and the rest of Montreal used to be majority francophone. It's now a minority, and the rest and the regions. There's always been a tension between Montreal and the rest of Quebec. It's more complicated in other places. There's a tension between New York and the rest of the U.S. There's a tension between Toronto and the rest of Canada, and so that's fair game for a metropolis. But in terms of I think he points to the divide in terms of what binds culturally and linguistically Montreal to the rest of Quebec seems to be thinning, and I think he's right.
So,
in what
sense exactly?
Well, in what sense? If you ask non-francophone Montrealers what is their identity, they will not say Quebec first. And some of them will not say Quebec at all. They'll say Montreal. There's a great bond with Montreal. Say Canada, but the relationship with Quebec, once, and there was a while ago, I was in government, and we said, okay, we're going to do this ad in French and in English, and the admin said, okay, but we shouldn't use the word Quebec in English. Why do you say that? Well, if you want people to bond with the message, it's better not to use the word Quebec. And I was wow. I mean, this is so ingrained in people who know public opinion and public reactions that's what advertisers say. That's something.
That is something. I'm curious what you think his MO is here. What do you think Yves-François Blanchet is trying to achieve in making these kinds of statements?
Frankly, I'm baffled. I think sociologically he's right, except for the fact that the divide has changed somewhat because the rest of Quebec is much more diverse than it used to be, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago.
True.
You'll see, people of color everywhere, except that the nation, the Francophone nation outside Montreal works in integrating very easily these people to Quebec language and culture. In Montreal, it's much more difficult, But why did he say that? I mean, it's like Professor Blanchet was talking instead of the politician Blanchet. He's saying, well, it used to be that the Bloc had 7 MPs from the island. Now it's only 1. We're going to try and get more, but it's difficult. Well, as a politician, how useful is it to say that? That was my question.
So I'm curious, when you said, you agree for the most part with what he said, the question is, why did he say it? When he writes, the history, language, values, and culture of the very generous host society are being marginalized, you agree with that statement as well? And if you do agree, and it's being marginalized now, is the concern that, 2, 3, 4 generations from now, it will have lost all of its original identity?
Oh, no. I mean, look at Louisiana. It takes generations for a culture to disappear. It can lose critical mass, it can lose predominance, but it's very hard to disappear. But just the sheer statistics, on the island of Montreal, the number of Francophones, mother tongue, has become minority just about 10 years ago. The number of Francophones who speak French at home, whether it's for 400 years or 2 years, is now in a minority. This minority trend will continue, and this has consequences because as though bilingualism is rising almost everywhere, having French as a second language is not the same as having French as a first language, because when you have it as a first language, even an adopted first language, it becomes your culture. It becomes it's not only transactional, the shows, the artists, you're part of a common glue. When you have a language as a second language, you're much further from this group, and it's tested. When you ask Anglo-Montrealers or non-francophones how much time they spend watching French TV or reading a French newspaper, it's dismal. It's just dismal.
You're right. You're largely right. There is a huge divide on that front. But then I can't help but think that, if I think about Jean-François Robert's approach to this, like how do we change this? The size of the lettering on a sign isn't going to make a difference.
Well, everything and nothing will make a difference. It's an accumulation of things. But listen, I sometimes have ideas that are not implemented. One of my ideas for a long time has been, listen, there are so many people outside Montreal who almost never come to Montreal, and they really feel it's a strange city in all the senses of the word. And there are people in Montreal who never go to the rest of Quebec, never. And I say, listen, when you're 16, 17, and 18, it should be part of the curriculum to go a month and a half, 2 months, Montrealers outside Montreal and Quebecers in Montreal, just to know the people. They're nice people. They're all very friendly, and it's okay. I would implement that as a civic nationalism, just to break the ice.
Yeah, I have to tell you, as I hear you say that, I'm kind of taken aback. I spent, not last summer, the summer before that maybe, driving from here all the way up to Rivière-du-Loup, spending a couple of nights here, a couple of nights there. I don't know, maybe it's different when you come from the big city. Everybody was nice. Everybody was hospitable. And this idea that if you come to Montreal from having lived in one of the regions in Quebec, you're kind of taken aback. My first reaction is, of course, you're taken aback. It's a gigantic city. You've never seen anything like this where you live. That's one reason. Do you think really there's a giant cultural shock after noticing that you're in a big city for people coming from somewhere else in Quebec?
It's not only, it's not, well, there's the big city factor, of course, but people are really stunned at how much English they hear on Sainte-Catherine Street. They are really stunned because it's a different reality from what they live in Quebec City, which is a nicely sized city. It is completely different. I'm going to give you another. I was for 5 years in Washington, D.C. And when I moved back to Montreal, one thing that struck me is that in restaurants, we heard French songs. I say, oh my God, it's been years since I've been in a restaurant with French songs on the speaker. So I'm not saying, it is, and people see that the diversity is much greater in Montreal than it is in the regions, although it's growing.
But
wouldn't
typically
that be
you
true
say
of
that's
any...
something to celebrate, not something to necessarily be afraid of.
Well, and I would think that would be the case with any major metropolis.
Well, it's... I love this story. When someone is rude in New Hampshire, you tell them you must be from New York, because people are seen to be rude if they live in New York. So there's this dichotomy, but the identity and linguistic insecurity that stems from the fact that we are afraid of losing Montreal, where French should be a common language and when Quebec culture should be at least known and shared. That is real. That is real.
Okay. I would say the one thing that did come up today, Jean-François, and I would point that out, is nowhere in these comments over Montreal is the fact that this is the economic engine of this province even come up. And without Montreal, where would Quebec be?
Well, Montreal is half. So without the other half, where would Montreal be?
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure that it's half. I think it's probably closer to three-quarters.
Half.
But okay.
It is half.
You're talking about population or economic input?
No, economic, GDP.
Okay. We are out of time. I thank you very much. We'll talk to you again later in the week.
All right.